One of the most uncontroversial pieces of marriage advice I can give is that it's never a good idea to focus obsessively on the sins of the past. Even though, this is a common mistake that people make in romantic relationships, most people understand, intellectually at least, that it's not productive or healthy to dwell on the slights that your spouse has committed in the past or the hurts they caused you long ago.
I see where he's going with this.
An argument, as soon as you utter the phrase, oh yeah, well, remember the time when you fill in the blank, you've likely destroyed any chance of...
See, hold on. I know where he's going with this. That idea is correct. I agree with that. Why? Sins of the past should not affect the present and how you deal with things. But they do matter when you see present behavior being a reflection of what's happened in the past. Because the past is prologue for the present. And how you respond to the past will determine your future. Oh, that's off the dome. So when we look at certain things, let's say issues with black people, like how we just talked about redlining, or how, there's a lot of black people in inner cities. Look at crime, look at violence, look at poverty rates, you know what I'm saying? Where does this come from? It comes from back then, and we can either see how it came about and how exactly that shit affects us today, bro. It is what it is. Now, as a white person, you're not really gonna think of that in that type of level, because what did your parents face? What did your grandparents face? Aside from regular, maybe poverty, okay, maybe famine, if you're in the Great Depression, you faced those issues. However, you did not face the backdrop of racism as well as those issues. You weren't seen as subhuman for the color of your skin. You weren't seen as 3/5 of a man because of where you came from. Okay? That's the difference. So yes, everybody had struggles back then, but you can't just try to make it seem like there's no color in it. And that's why I was talking about I don't see color. You dig what I'm saying? Listen, if you're a real person, that uses their brain, you understand what I'm saying.
Of reaching any mutual understanding or worthwhile resolution. Once you bring ancient history into the discussion, you've stopped having a discussion and instead turned it into a game of scoring points.
See, certain things, ancient history, really. Jim Crow was 50s, 60s. It's not ancient. The people are still alive. Oh.
Everything is clouded now by resentment and grudges. Nothing is solved by your decision to root through the past in search of ammo to use against your spouse in the present day. You've only created more problems without doing anything to address whatever problem started the argument in the first place. Often you've taken some small dispute and turned it into a much bigger deal than it ever needed to be. So one minute you're squabbling because your wife gave you a hard time about not using a coaster when you put your drink down on the coffee table. The next minute you're rehashing an argument dating back to 2009. This is why it's best to move on from what has already happened and already been hashed out, and allow your marriage to exist in the present moment where you both have control over the outcome. You cannot change the past. You only have power over the present, and therefore, to some extent, the future. Now,
it's not as simple as just moving on when the issues... I'm literally repeating myself right now, bro. Bro, the average wealth of black people, I think, was... Don't quote me on it, but the numbers is around what I'm about to say. Black people in 18... Fuck. I'm not even going to say it because I can't remember it. Hold on. We're actually going to look it up right now. Fuck, I can't find it anymore. I will keep going, my bad.
Now, if this principle applies to marriages, so too does it apply to much larger groups like, say, a nation. In fact, it applies even more to nations than to marriages, because at least the infractions committed by your spouse in the past were actually committed by your spouse, whereas the resentment that one group in a country may carry against another group in the country will often stem from sins that were not committed by anyone living today, nor against anyone living today. I mean, it's one thing to hold someone's past sins against them. Even that is often counterproductive and unjust, but it's an entirely a different thing, a much worse thing, to hold someone's past sins against someone else who had nothing to do with them. Yet this is exactly the situation that the woke race hustlers have tried desperately and with horrifying success to engineer. One of the reasons they've been so successful in stirring up these resentments, keeping ancient wounds fresh and still bleeding, is that they start the resentment building process very early, making sure to preach the grievance gospel to children from a very young age. Case in point, the latest uber woke episode from Disney's uber woke children's show, which is called The Proud Family. Now, for a little bit of background, The Proud Family was originally a kid show on the Disney Channel back in the early 2000s. It was canceled in 2005, and then in 2022, it became just the latest reboot that nobody needed, nobody asked for, nobody wanted. The rebooted Proud Family, which can be found now on Disney Plus, promises to be louder and prouder, and it certainly fulfills at least half of that promise. A clip from a recent episode has gone
That's funny. Yeah, there's a lot more gay characters on it now.
viral over the past few days, and in it, we are treated to what we're told is a rap or a song about the sinister origins of the United States. And here it is.
This country was built on slavery, which means to back
Okay, we watched it. We can skip it.
The Bluey. Just some nice, wholesome children's content. That's why I'll stick with the Bluey, I think. Okay, first of all, there's been some misinformation about the content of that clip. People are saying that the Disney show featured an anti-American song. Well, that is anti-American, but it's not a song. It's literally just shrill voices chanting vacuous bumper sticker slogans without rhyme or rhythm.
What was anti-American about it?
Which I guess, Sepp doesn't really separate it much from many other pop songs. But as Martin Luther King would say, we should judge woke propaganda not by its shrillness, but by its content. The content here is ridiculous on multiple levels. So let's go through them.
Okay.
First,
this is what I want to see. I want to see how he breaks down why it's ridiculous. Because, hey, I like seeing what other people say.
most important, and it is really necessary that we emphasize this, slaves did not build this country. This country was built over the course of hundreds of years, beginning long before it was a country. The building started in the 1400s when the first European explorers sailed across treacherous and uncharted seas to discover these lands. It continued with the European settlers in the 1500s and 1600s who built a life for themselves in this unknown wilderness, facing untold threats and, for many of them, certain death. This country was built by the colonists and the American revolutionaries. It was built by the pioneers who expanded the country from the east, heading west out into a hostile wilderness occupied by warring Indian tribes. It was built by war and conquest, by discovery, by diplomacy, by industry. It was built and then nearly undone by a civil war that killed 620,000 men, then built up again, only to thrive once more. The country was built by the people who made it into the world's great power in the 20th century, who won world wars and brought about peace and economic prosperity. It was built by many people over many centuries.
I think when they say built by slaves, I think that's a term, it's a phrase that they brought up to create an emotional reaction. You know what I mean? Because when you say built by slaves, you automatically think, oh yeah, black people did all this. This is all black people. All black people. Well, slaves had a hand in building the country. You know what I mean? Free labor. But it wasn't solely built by slaves. It wasn't solely built by black people. So that is a fact. I agree with that. It's an emotional term that they use to get an emotion out of you.
And for a portion of that history, some people in some parts of the country owned slaves. That certainly is not enough to justify the claim that the slaves built the country. To make that claim is to erase nearly everyone who really did build the country. It's to paper over America's actual history with your grievance-mongering nonsense. Now, if the mere historical fact of slavery automatically means that the country was built by slavery and forever is indebted to slaves and their descendants, then of course the same must be said about every nation on the planet. There is no race, no people, no nation anywhere in the world who does not inherit the guilt of slavery, if indeed the guilt of slavery can be inherited. As I will never tire of pointing out, the only thing that makes America's relationship to slavery unique is how comparatively quickly we abolished it and the lengths we went to abolish it. Western nations were patrolling the oceans to shut down the slave trade for many years, while non-Western nations did everything in their power to continue the slave trade. Also, you notice something. You notice how I didn't use the word we when talking about the people who did build the country. Okay? A great many of the pioneers and explorers and inventors and warriors and statesmen and leaders, etc., who built the country were white.
Mm-hmm. See, I was going to say, it seemed like he wants them to give themselves a pat on the back for trying to stop something that they had a hand in starting. But then I thought, I can't really say they started it because slavery is something that they're already doing. Everybody's already doing. However, one of the main differences with slavery in America and other places was that they were pushing the idea that black people were not humans. Black people were subhuman. You know what I'm saying? So it became discrimination solely based off of your skin color. Not just, oh yeah, you're a slave, you're going to work for me. Boom, pow. You dig what I'm saying? And I hope, and because he is, you know, his focus is not anywhere near, his lens is not anywhere near on, you know, being black people, experiences of racism. So of course he's not going to be able to have that nuance to the conversation, even though not everything he's saying is in the wrong place. That's what makes it tough because, you know, let's say someone who is not cultured, let's say someone who has not experienced a different culture than theirs, they're not going to see the other layer to what he's saying. You dig what I'm saying? There's more to it when it comes to it, bro.
White. I mean, most of them were white. That's the historical reality. It just is. And we certainly shouldn't be ashamed of pointing that out, or let ourselves be shamed into not pointing it out or denying it. Yet, as a white person, I don't say we, because we would include me, and I didn't do any of those things. I didn't come here on the Mayflower. I wasn't on the Lewis and Clark expedition. I didn't fight in the Civil War. I didn't storm the beaches of Normandy. People who looked kind of like me did, but I didn't. So I don't take credit for their achievements or claim their accolades, just as I don't pretend to have experienced their suffering or felt their pain. I stand at the end of this long line of triumph and sacrifice. I am its beneficiary. And so are you, whatever your race. Yet in that Disney song, that's not really a song, we hear the word we being used. And this is always the case with the race hustlers. They talk about the long ago sufferings of people they never met and who they missed meeting by a century and a half, and they say we and us. But no, it's not a we or an us situation because you were not enslaved. That didn't happen to you. It just didn't. It may have happened to your ancestors, but if you go back a little further, you may just as well find that your ancestors did it to others. See, this is the problem of trying to claim your entire lineage as if it all happened to you, is that you cannot isolate this one particular moment in your ancestry and take direct ownership of it, speaking about it as if you were there, without owning all of the rest of your ancestral history. A history that is guaranteed to include brutality and oppression inflicted